Welcome to the Locker Room, the podcast that delivers practical coaching advice you can implement today. Whether you're a coach, instructor, or an educator, we bring you real stories and actionable tips from experts in the field. Each episode explores key lessons from their careers to help you elevate your own coaching. We always wrap up by asking, if you were going to go back to your first day as a coach, what advice would you give yourself? So today we are joined by Josh Himbury, and you just did a great summary for me. So if possible, Josh, I don't normally do this, but could you do that again and say who you are and kind of how we met and what you're up to now?
Yeah, thanks, Steve. It's nice to be here. Nice to chat with you. And
Yeah.
as you mentioned, we met each other through the Perishable Winter Sports Club and coaching there. And it's the locker room in the Winter Sports Club was a great place to be able to throw down ideas. And just saying to you, is my background. I feel like where I'm at the moment is a bit of a sum of all my experiences. So going back a ways, we played rugby and cricket through high school in particular, and skied a little bit on weekends, and really sort of fell in love
Hmm.
with the sport. From through my teens in particular, and I was lucky enough to do it with my family, and then moved into the athletic world, started competing for a while as a mogul skier. I was okay as an athlete, but definitely, sort of a little bit fast and loose. But I fell in love with coaching in particular. I started doing that on the weekends at Perisher, and just had a great time while I was studying international studies and law at the University of Sydney. I worked for a little while as a lawyer, but really enjoyed the coaching side of things a whole lot more, and ended up coaching with the Australian programs for about 10 years. And these days, I live in San Diego in the US, and I work in the partnership space within sport here in California. And it's pretty awesome because I have always enjoyed being in sport, have always enjoyed working with other people, and the partnership space where I'm at the moment, it sort of blends that sort of maybe the commercial and the legal side of things with the relationship side of things. And it's a pretty great space to be in. But I still get to coach. I work with the San Diego Touch Rugby Club here as their coach, and still get to ski a little bit and coach sometimes with some club programs here. So yeah, it's a pretty exciting place to be, and it's awesome to be able to think back to the times that you and I had in the locker room where we threw
Yeah,
ideas around. So looking forward to
yeah,
rehashing some of those.
yeah, exactly. So then like you just mentioned, you were an athlete when you were younger, and as you came up. So one of the things that always interests me with this, because that was never my thing, right? I wasn't an athlete. I just came in through teaching, and we used to talk about this a lot. So you have lots of experiences from being an athlete. I guess this is twofold. Like, is there anything that happened whilst you're an athlete that you thought, oh yeah, this, like when you got into the coaching space, you thought, oh, this is something I want to encourage or I want to happen? And then the second thing, is there anything that you thought when you did become a coach, you thought, oh, this kind of happened to me when I was a kid, and there's no chance I'm gonna do this to these kids here.
Yeah. I was lucky enough as an athlete to work with a number of different coaches. So I was able to work with coaches from Australia. I was based out of Steamboat Springs Winter Sports Club in the Northern Hemisphere winters. So as an athlete, I was able to draw upon a lot of different pieces of advice from lots of different coaches to sort of build the type of athlete that I became. And I think that had some strengths, but also, thinking about like the long-term consistency, it was somewhat difficult to be able to piece together that program in its entirety. So that being said, I took that lesson or those lessons as an athlete, and being able to pick and choose from different coaches and trainers, and tried to do that in my style as a coach
Yeah,
there. So I think that's pretty cool, and I had to figure out my own style. As definitely like a pretty big lesson to draw from that athletic background. The other thing I would say, maybe the flip side of it, isn't it as an athlete, you're the focal point. The coaches focus on you all the time, and they're out there. The coaches are out there every day to help you get better. Um, as a coach, you can't be the focal point. The focal point is the athlete. So it's almost like a
yeah,
flip in the mindset there, to make sure that every day you've got to absolutely prepare yourself to be the best that you could be, but it's in order for somebody else to be able to succeed or achieve their goals. So the purpose becomes a little bit more broader a little bit more broad than just within yourself, which I think is really cool, and that's a great lesson to take into any part of your life.
There's something you said to me, and I use it all the time now. You said years ago, it was at luncheons, and you said that coaches don't have athletes, athletes have coaches. That's always rung in my head. If you could expand a bit on that for me, because I've probably butchered it over the years, but what is it that you mean?
That's awesome, Stevie. Because you sending me out the notes, like are there any principles
Yeah,
that, or sort of mottos that you have in your coaching? That was the first one I wrote down, and
yeah,
I completely stole that from Pete McNeil. He that was a
okay,
piece of advice that I received as a coach. Uh, you know,
yeah,
Coaches don't have athletes, athletes have coaches. And what I sort of took to that to mean was that as a coach, you're a facilitator. You help in all sorts of aspects of an athlete's life, whether or not that's on snow, off snow, nutrition, mental health, whatever it might be. You help facilitate in many different aspects, but also your role is somewhat. It's in transit, especially in the role that I had as initially as a more developmental coach. My hope
mhm,
is that the athletes that I get to coach, they move on from me. They're able to continue to progress. If I was to hang on, like that's my athlete, and hang on to that
yeah,
for a long period of time, there's like a sense of ownership, and I think the relationship can get kind of funky. But at the end of the day, there's
mm,
got to be a recognition, particularly in a pathway program like we have in Australia, where lots of really good coaches, and sort of it's structured as such so that you can continue to work with different coaches. Once an athlete reaches a certain level, they're able to be set free in inverted commas. And
yeah,
a really good example I had of that was Will Fenley. So Will,
yeah,
is an athlete that I coached for a number of years, obviously British
yeah,
background as well. So I think you feel a lot of love there. But
yeah,
our role within the Australian system was to help develop his skills so that he could get to a point where
mhm,
he would then emerge onto the World Cup, and
mhm,
be as well prepared as possible. And that was going to be with the British team. And we always knew that
mhm,
it was a transitionary type relationship. It lasted for a number of years, and obviously saw Fenners on the World
yeah,
Cup for quite a while, and that relationship's still really
yeah,
strong, which is awesome.
yeah,
But we had to be able to, let him go to be able to go to the next level.
mhm,
Conversely,
yeah,
though, in terms of an athlete having a coach, you've got to be there for them. An athlete has got
yeah,
to feel as though that coach has got their back, and they can say, "Hey,
mhm,
this is my coach." A coach should probably never say, "Hey, this is my athlete." Um,
yeah. I
so
see.
it's
Yeah,
just little language there. But it's
yeah,
something that Pete said to me very early doors that
yeah,
stuck with me for a long time, and sort of helped
yeah.
me figure out where my role was within the whole pathway and within the setup.
So now, like you mentioned before, you've been an athlete, you've been a coach, but then you've been an athlete again. Did since coaching, then playing sport again, especially within like a team environment. I suppose I know we treated the moguls is very much a team. It is very different. I remember that I was talking with Georgie. It was very much a team environment that we had anyway, even though everybody competes individually. Um, how has that changed for you? So since becoming a coach and then playing again, like you said with the touch, uh, are you a good student? Are you a good athlete to other coaches now, or how does that work?
I think now I'd like to think that I'm pretty decent, as an athlete,
Okay.
as a result of
Yeah,
being being coaching for many years. I
yeah,
think as I said to you in the intro, wasn't that good as an athlete. And
all right.
maybe like somewhat like had some physical capabilities that were pretty decent, but I think I lacked this, like the discipline and commitment at that stage to really be world class, as an athlete. That and you see that in a lot of different athletes. So as a coach, you you learn a whole lot more, about what goes on behind the scenes. And you mentioned Georgie. Georgie was hugely eye-opening, as a mentor and role model for me. Not only because she was my coach, And basically the first coach that I had within the Perishable Winter Sports Club, but also a coach of mine when I was a coach. And she, just it was really awesome in terms of opening my eyes to how broad the world of sport is beyond like you and your little athletic mindset and focus every day to go out there and be the best possible mogul athlete you can. So I think there's a lot that I learned over the course of those 10 years, whether or not it's discipline, like trying to do the little things really, really well so that you're able to get out and achieve the best you possibly can achieve in your field of choice. And in terms of taking those lessons into my like practical world, I'd say I did it really well in two separate areas. The first was when I tore my ACL the first time. I've done it twice, but when I tore my ACL, I think throughout my rehab, I was really diligent and focused, and quite good at just listening to my physical therapist or my physiotherapist. You could tell I've been in America for a little while now. My physio, and trying to do everything that he said that I should do, and I had complete trust in him. So that trusting relationship between a coach and athlete, physio and a patient is really, really important. And I think I did that quite well. Now, whether or not I was super smart in the decision-making processes that I had and what led me to tearing my ACL again, that's another thing. And I learned a lot from that and continued to be really diligent with my rehab, and now all good. The second example I'd use is in touch rugby or touch footy. I played for the US at the World Cup in Nottingham last year. And to be honest, like I frothed on being in the athlete zone again. Like it was so awesome. We had a great coaching staff with Dave Parker and Ryan Pollock they came over from Australia to help us within the World Cup. And I just soaked it up. I was such a nerd as far as touch was concerned, and it got me really excited again about like being an athlete. And I was just there to listen and do what they said. And I had again complete trust in them because they had many years. They really cared about us, and it was really awesome. And I think I ended up playing quite well and fit into the team really well. And our team, we ended up coming sixth, which was pretty good for the US and where we are as a touch nation. So I loved being in that athletic zone again. It was really nice to have somebody really looking out for you. Because of those things that I mentioned, that trust, that care, that expertise. So, when I try and coach, in the touch rugby space or with skiing again now, that's definitely the types of things that I want to bring to the table to work with those athletes.
Yeah, that's awesome. Any advice to someone who's injured at the moment?
Yeah, I mean, when I did my ACL the first time, my friend Joel sent me a video clip. It was a TED talk by a guy named Sam Burns. And it's the title of it is something along the lines of like my recipe for a happy life or my recipe for success. And whenever somebody gets injured, that especially unfortunately we see a few ACLs in the snow sports world, I send them this video because I think there's 3 lessons in there that are super awesome that I continue to try and apply regardless of injury. Number 1 is focus on what you can do, not on what you can't do. So, throughout like a rehabilitation process, obviously there's so many things that you can't do, but little things like whether or not you can get a full revolution on a bike, that was a huge milestone for me. Whether or not you can go from a walk to a jog, little milestones like that, I think are really, really important. So number 1, focus on what you can do, not what you can't do. Number 2 is surround yourself with people who really care about you, or who are experts. So as far as like seeking help, it's like thinking about the medical professionals that you're surrounded with, whether or not it's physios, it's personal trainers, it's doctors, surgeons, whatever it might be, but also just generally a support mechanism of a support network of people who really have your best interests at heart and also can keep you accountable. And the third was never miss a party if you can help it. So I think that one's a good one too. So it doesn't mean you have to like let the lid off all the time, but if you can help it, try and get to those sorts of events, because I think they're really, really important. And these things, they shall pass. There's injuries, unfortunately, in our sport. and in all sports. So yeah, if you stay focused on those things, I think you can get through it, and there is a light at the end of the tunnel. So
Yeah,
yeah.
no, that's cool. One of the things I was curious to ask you, because I know we worked a lot in Australia together, but then you obviously ran programs overseas as well, which have a longer time frame to them. Like you've worked as a ski teacher too in short lessons. Is there any tactics you use when you know it's going to be seasonal long, or you know it's going to be like just a one-on-one? Do you change your approach? Are you a different? You spoke about styles before. You a different teacher, coach.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you think about like a lot of the lesson structures that exist in Australia as far as like a
Mm,
2 or 3 hour lesson, like, there's
definitely.
you have a pretty short space of time to be able to have maximum impact. So if in those sorts of lessons, if a student can come away with one tangible thing that, they thought they got better at or something to work on over the course of their holiday, their trip, their season, then that can be amazing. Um, and that goes back down to like identifying students and their goals, like going back to the
Hmm.
APSI nine lesson essentials. I think that's
Yeah.
a really key one, and in that course of that 3 hour lesson, don't necessarily have a whole lot of time to truly understand how these students work. Like you can do your best,
Mm,
of course, but it's very different compared to somebody that you've known for years and years. That being
mm,
said, the principle of identifying a student and their goals remains the same. You might like be able to be a bit more collaborative in terms of the way that you come up with these goals, and the how you're going to achieve those goals. That can be a little bit more collaborative in a longer term
mhm,
relationship than it is in a 3 hour lesson. But at the same time, like those goals remain really important. So that goal setting piece, I think, is consistent. It just might be
mhm.
a short version or it might be a really long version. So
Yeah.
yes, the approach can definitely changes when you're working with people for a longer period of time. Like you have the opportunity to be able to periodize, so like build up load accordingly and maybe drop down load. And if you're working with somebody over a long period of time, you also understand like where the load's been. Whereas if somebody
Mhm,
comes in a 3 hour lesson, you don't necessarily have any idea
mhm,
as to what the extent of the load is. Although, you
mhm.
can ask some questions and find out. But everybody's different, so it's really hard to necessarily be super accurate with that. So I say I think you can be a really good manager of an athlete over a longer period of time and understand where to push a little bit more, understand where to take back a little bit as well. The other thing is, in a 3 hour lesson, you can like somebody can have a big light bulb moment in that 3 hour lesson, be like, wow, I never understood like this specific thing about how to tip the ski on edge with your lower leg or whatever. That analogy worked great for me. You can still have those light bulb moments
Mhm.
in longer term programs, but often it's like really chipping away at like small
Mm.
minutiae and
Yeah.
those small percentage gains, and that that can be kind of frustrating because sometimes you may not feel as though you get anywhere.
Mhm.
So it's important there to be like pretty constantly evaluative as far as like looking back at where you came from, utilizing tools, not only like the communication between an athlete and a coach in a verbal sense, but also utilizing video,
Yeah.
utilizing other metrics to be like, hey, can you notice the difference between where you were 2 months ago and right now?
Mm.
So that can help provide a little bit of perspective as well.
That's interesting. I was reading something about this the other day, and they were talked about like like you said that the highs are the highs, the light bulb moments are like peaks. And they're saying that obviously after a peak there's potentially a trough. It's like don't always like the ceiling in terms of don't always shoot for the stars. Just make sure you don't go below the floor. So it's like keep the floor at a certain level. So like I was thinking that sprung
Mm.
into my mind when you said that, because it's like I'm just making sure, like you said, managing the athlete, making sure they don't drop below the detail, like the boring stuff, like you were saying, like the things that you should do every day, like along the path,
Mm.
that then is the
Yeah.
trajectory goes that way. So that's interesting. That came to mind when you were saying that.
But there's a really, I mean, we spent a lot of time in Finland,
Mm,
with training camps and competitions, especially at a World Cup level. That was the kickoff to the World Cup season
hmm.
in the moguls world. So we would spend a long time in Ruka,
Yeah.
it's up near the Arctic Circle. Finnish people are the happiest people in the world, according to the UN Happiness Report,
Hmm.
World Happiness Report. And they have this concept in Finland, which I did a bit of research while we were there, especially through COVID, um, about this concept called sisu, which is basically like a contentedness or a centeredness. It's there's no real like direct English translation. Some people call it like a grim forbearance, which I think is like a little down, but it's this like kind of seeking that level, and so it's not riding like being the high and
Mm.
then the low and going through like a big sine curve. It's this curve that kind of
Yeah.
exists like nice and here, and if you can, sort of implement that as a coach or as an athlete in the way that you operate, I think you can like build really
Mhm.
nicely, whether or not that's skill development or your strength, whatever it might be. But trying to stay really like consistent, moderated, and sort of focused
Yeah.
in that like nice middle ground is a really cool place to be.
Yeah.
So yeah, something that stuck with me is like the Sisu
Yeah.
concept, to sort of summarize what you were
Yeah.
saying with the peaks and troughs.
Yeah, exactly. That's the thing, isn't it? It's making sure that the floor, like, don't worry about like reaching the highs of the highs. Just make sure the floor is just creeping up. So then over a longer period, 6 months to a year, if you have little victories, little wins, like when you look back, it's huge. It's a huge jump that you can have.
Yeah.
So talking of coaching and the relationships and that type of thing. So last time we were together, I think here, was with you and Maddie. So I guess that's a bit of a background on that, who Maddie is and what your role was with her, and how does that work? Basically, where the trope is don't coach family members and loved ones, and that's exactly what you were doing. So how did that go?
Yeah, yeah, maybe a cardinal sin.
Yeah.
But no, it was awesome. So Maddie is my younger sister, 3.5 years younger than I am. A hell of a lot more stubborn and committed than I am. But she's an unreal athlete. Competed at the 2018 Olympics, competed on the World Cup for a number of years, and I was lucky enough to obviously not only be her brother but be her coach. So Maddie came up through the Australian Mogul Skiing Academy, as well as in their NSWIS programs. And basically, with some structural changes and whatnot, the way it worked out was that I was able to coach Maddie for quite a period of time. So as you mentioned, yeah, we were in Zermatt on a training camp together, and we were able to catch up with you and Hannah
Hmm.
for dinner, which is awesome.
Yeah.
In terms of managing that relationship, Maddie and I are still as close as ever. Obviously, we have the Pacific Ocean between us at the
Yeah.
moment, but I think it's pretty awesome. We have a very unique relationship where I think the both of us obviously cares very deeply about one another. But also we had some pretty tricky times.
Mm.
We traveled the world through COVID for the purposes of skiing,
Mhm.
which was great, but that wasn't easy. It was just essentially the two of us for quite a long period of time, and it could be really tricky, and spending some time in some close environments. But what we did really well was, when we were out on snow, we had very like clear roles. I was a coach, she was an athlete. We worked together, we collaborated, but also if one of us had something to say that was quite, to the point or forceful, we really took that in like a coach athlete relationship, because at the end of the day, we were trying to get to this goal of competing at the highest level and executing the skills as best as possible. So that the coach athlete relationship on snow was really great. Similarly in the gym, that's not necessarily my big area of expertise, but I was there to be able to help guide and sort of manage with Maddie. But she was excellent at bringing on other people who were experts in their field, whether or not it's physios or strength and conditioning trainers, to be able to help her level up, and leveled me up as well as a coach. So I played that sort of consistent, I guess, manager role, outside of the on snow coaching. But then we lived together as well. So, at the end of the day, we're brother and sister. And we knew that in those sorts of situations where, we're just cooking dinner or chilling out, watching a show or
Mhm.
something, we're allowed to be brother and sister.
Yeah.
And it's almost like a slightly different role, depending on what the environment is. So we're very, very lucky to have a pretty awesome parental set in my mum and
Yeah.
dad. Like they're awesome people too, and our family is very tight knit as a result of that. Nonetheless, it didn't make it easy all the time. As long as we were clear on our roles, depending on the environment, we were really good. And every now and then we had to have, I guess, like a come to Jesus moment and sort of re-clarify those roles, so that we could make sure we move forward, whether or not that's as a brother and sister relationship, or the coach athlete relationship. Just sort of having essentially like a re-goal setting or an evaluation type conversation was really important for us.
That's cool. So if I'm hearing this right, it's goals and roles. So like
Hey, very good.
if any bit
Yep.
of friction or something happened, I guess it would come down to, we're if probably a misunderstanding from one side to the other, and it's like, no, hang on a minute, we have a shared goal here in the future, and I'm just trying to get you there, and then that together will then move us forward. There's a piece where it says, I forget who said it, but it was, any argument, normally if you argue long enough without the emotion getting into it, it normally comes down to like semantics. So it's an understanding thing from one side to the other. So that's often, like, I've seen that as well with, like, over the years with people. If someone's blown up at somebody else, and it's normally calmed down because they've managed to talk through and see, hey, I want to get you here, or we're going there, and once they've articulated that in a certain way, it moves everything forward. Is that what I'm hearing with you guys, or?
Yeah, and look, subsequently, like, since Maddie and I Maddie's no longer a full-time athlete, and I'm no longer a full-time coach. I went and studied my MBA here in San Diego, and one of the things I learned in organizational behavior was the two things that are the most important, as far as like getting everybody on the same page, was a shared mindset and a common goal. And I think Maddie and I were really, really good at those two things. We knew what our goal was, and we actually had a pretty similar approach. Maddie will say this, so I don't feel bad saying it, but she's definitely a lot more volatile than I am, and sort of was pretty high up and down on the sine curve, and I'm maybe a little bit more centered. But my job every day was to try and minimize the flaws, minimize the pits down there for her, so create that environment where she was able to get out there and achieve that goal with that common mindset or that shared mindset that we have. So yeah, I like sort of bringing it back to those two things, which at the time I couldn't articulate as well, but I realized in the aftermath that those two things are really important.
Yeah, and that comes back to what you said at the start, like a strong relationship. Like you said, you have such a strong familial relationship with your parents and your sister, so that obviously shines through as well when you're coaching. This is also an invite to Maddie to be on the podcast, so you can hear her side of it, see how good Josh really was. I'm just kidding.
Just let her out.
Right. The truth. So one of the ones I always like to ask is your biggest piece of advice that you've got from a coach, or it could be from an athlete, or something that has happened throughout your career, and you think, well, this, like, maybe a light bulb moment as a coach that you've had.
Yeah, I think what we're talking about earlier, where coaches don't have athletes, athletes have coaches. I think that's a really important one. As I said, Pete McNeil was the guy who passed that on to me. The other one that stuck with me for quite a while is complain or complete. And I know some of the athletes that I've worked with in the Osmose setup. One of them actually drew cartoons of every single person in our Osmose house, and it was really, really funny. This is Dom D'Souza. She did a great job. And in my cartoon, I have a little speech bubble above me saying "complain or complete." So obviously it was beat to death. But the other one that I would say is not necessarily advice, but I was sort of led there. Was within the Snow Australia Coaches Academy. We were able to have a workshop with Nam Baldwin, who is a phenomenal facilitator, strength and conditioning expert, but his big focus is a lot of breath work and moving your body from the sympathetic to the parasympathetic system, but also developing a lot of coaches and athletes. So he's worked with Mick Fanning, he was his personal coach for a number of years on the World Surf League with Steph Gilmore, a number of Red Bull athletes. And we were able to do a session with him, and Maddie and I also did some sessions with him while we're up in Queensland too. So he led me and led us to sort of create a bit of a coaching motto. And we did this it took a long time. We wrote words down, but finished with like my motto for coaching, which I still remember. And it's to create and develop athletes in a positive and nurturing environment. So the creation and development, is from the outset, like when you first meet people, to continuing that relationship for a long period of time. The word athlete I use really broadly. So I don't think it should be just somebody who executes a physical skill in the field of play. It's an athlete can be, somebody who goes to university, like they're doing their mental athletics by studying. I think everybody in society has the capacity to be an athlete. It's somebody who's trying to get better at something. And so I think that's been consistent throughout my life, not just in the sporting world, but outside of as well. And then a positive and nurturing environment. So the environment is key. You can set things up really, really well in a great environment where the task then almost becomes secondary. If you have the easiest is in the snowfields, right? Yeah. If you have a fantastic mogul course, or a great jump site or something, the environment's there, and maybe you work on tee sets, or maybe you do, flips or fulls or whatever it might be, but the environment is there. And, this is, as well as anyone, the terrain choice is super important. So, creating that environment where they're able to execute skills or develop skills or develop as a person, as an athlete, is really important. So I love that. And that's, I definitely developed that, wrote that down myself, but it was as a result of lots of input from other people. So to create and develop athletes in a positive and nurturing environment.
On that piece, one thing I saw a lot in Oz with us and not being part of the program for years and then becoming part of the programs as a coach, is that everybody wanted to be in the program. So both ways. So everybody wanted to be, all athletes, like in schools, all that sort of thing, always saw the Winter Sports Club as especially the mogul side, as something they wanted to do, something they wanted to be. And it's the same with the coaches. I remember that for years. Why do you think that was? Well, how did you manage that? Like you say about environment in terms of like geographical environment, but what about the environment that's set amongst people, like culture, that type of thing?
Yeah, it's I was absolutely the beneficiary of a wonderful mogul skiing environment in Australia for a number of years. I sort of came into it in the late 2000s, really, and hopefully left it in a half decent place where we were able to do some pretty amazing things. But in terms of what is it about that, like that mogul skiing culture? One, I think it's just really fun.
Yeah.
That's like skiing is fun and should be fun. And if you see like a group of 50 kids and a bunch of coaches like skiing zipper lines behind each other, I think it looks really fun. It's dynamic. So you see a lot of movement, people are jumping. That in and of itself is really fun. So I think that, like, from an external point of view, is really cool. It's fun and it's cool.
Yeah.
Like, I think, mogul skiing is pretty cool.
Yeah.
And exciting. It's sort of, mogul skiing is maybe the hardest type of skiing that there is to really master. So, I think that was that's a big part of it. But, beyond that, I think we had a really fantastic commitment to development. And that's not only the development of the athletes, but it's the development of the coaches. Again, I'll reference Pete here because he was hugely supportive of me as a coach going through the APSI accreditation system and, completing my levels, which I was able to do. And he created time for me to be able to do that. So to be able to take time off coaching so that I could go and, participate in courses or exams or whatnot, which was awesome. And he also is such a nerd that he wanted me to go and do it so that I could bring back information. And I think, I was able to position myself quite nicely as like a blend of, the athletic background with the APSI background. And that's something that I really wanted to keep going and be really consistent with. And it's proud to say that a lot of the other coaches continued to do that and continued to, maybe they came from a mogul skiing background, and then did the APSI courses. And I think that was a phenomenal place to sort of break down your information and break your skiing down to then build it back up to an even better place. So yeah, we were very lucky to be able to continue to support that over a long period of time. So, when you have a group of ripping kids and some coaches who are enthusiastic and fun, I think that creates an environment that, is desirable, and that's why people want to join. And we were lucky enough to have people like you come and join too.
I feel very lucky. I'm very fortunate to join that for a small bit of time. One of the things I really liked that we did as well was, like you obviously, like we said, it's I see it almost as a ladder, like the pathway. So like I was with the young kids, like developing their skills, and then they would go on to you guys and become like mogul athletes. But one of the things I remember you guys did was we flipped it. I remember when like I went and worked with your guys, and then you came and worked with ours, and I remember thinking I was so nervous. I was like, God, this is crazy, but that was cool. I thought that thing, like doing that just shows, I think, like you mentioned there, it's just you can learn from everything, right? Everybody can learn from everyone. Everyone has something that somebody else doesn't know, and I think that is something that I really, well, like I said, this is why I do this podcast now, is because that's the thing that I remember looking back was important. There was that, like, that searching for more, and like thinking like, okay, so this happened and this happened, and but I think so. I think we could have done it a different way, or we could have done it a different way, and just practically swapping us, like putting me with the older kids, you with the younger kids. One, it got us to know everybody, right? It's such a small community anyway. I think that's a nice way, because we're, like you said, we're all on the same bit anyway. There's one mogul course. Well, I'm told obviously both of them are made, but often at the start of the season there's just one. So everybody's there, like our kids are with World Cup skiers. And also then they get to see you guys, they get to see all the other coaches, and it's just a great environment. But yeah, I remember that being a big part of it was I guess there was no like ego-y bit like that. It's like, okay, you go with these kids, you go with them, and it doesn't matter, just take what you can and take it back to your own position. I thought that was really, really cool.
Yeah, I'd say two things to that. One, like you're right, the vertical integration, like the ladder within the Australian mogul skiing pathway was really good. I think it was phenomenal at that point. We're in the same playing field as like, Des, who was our head coach at the time of our national team, as like entry level into schools, like first time down a mogul course. And like we can all stand at the bottom of the mogul course or be on the same piste or whatever it is and communicate and collaborate. And I always remember working with you and, skiing down Zali's, and we were working on the zipper, like keeping the zipper really vertical, because that was the concept that you brought in. And I just hadn't thought about that before, and just like little nuggets like that are awesome. And then to your second point on ego, that's coaches don't have athletes have coaches.
Exactly.
There's no ownership or ego there. It's an understanding that in that vertical integration in the Australian mogul skiing system, which is so small as well. So it's important to make sure you maintain those relationships, and without ego, that becomes paramount, because that they're going to be really well set up for that next step, and people in each step along the way are really good at what they do.
Yeah. I remember one thing, talking about ego. I remember when I did that, it was early season, there was no bumps, so I just ended up doing some random drills. Well, not random. I ended up doing drills with the guys, and I remember I didn't know them that well at that point. And then we were coming down, and there was one kid that just kept going, like walking back up and doing it, and he'd always get 2 or 3 more reps in of the drill, because as people were chatting or whatever, we're chatting it through, asking what people felt and all that sort of stuff, he would walk up and do it again. And I thought, what's he doing that for? I thought it was like at first took it as like, oh, he's bored, or he's like whatever. And I had a chat with him, and he was just in the zone, like trying to do it, and it was Coop. And I think like he was, and I remember talking to Pete about it, like, what are some things you see in our kids, to give you an inkling of where they're going to be, and it's things like that. Like he just hard work. Like he was like, it's just reps. It's like just putting the reps in, and Yeah, I just always remembered that. Like it's, yeah, he was getting 2 to 3 goes in every other one that people were getting one in. I know it's a small example, but
Mm.
it's just that sort of mindset was interesting. So you say that about ego. It's just like, he's like, yeah, just literally walking up the hill to get another go in. Yeah, I thought
Yeah.
that was pretty cool.
Yeah. Yeah, he's a technician and loves ski technique,
Mm.
surfing
Yeah,
technique, spike ball
yeah,
technique, whatever it
yeah,
is. Like, he's a technician. I think the best athletes in the world are
yeah,
technicians, regardless of the environment
yeah.
that they're in. So it's pretty cool to be able to see for him. Like, he's got great feel.
Mm.
So that, like, kinesthetic quality for him is, and like doing it is really important. But for some people, they need to hear about it a
Mm.
little bit more, maybe like, verbalize it from a coach, and other people love the visual
Mm.
side of things. There's like the video feedback for him. Yeah, it was big on feel.
Mm.
So he had to get reps on reps. And that's, at the end of the day, skiing is a doing sport.
Mm.
And most sports are doing sports.
Mm.
So you do have to be able to feel it out.
I had this is I'll say the example, but I won't. I'll say what happened. But I won't say the person's name. But I remember Georgie and I were at the bottom of the course, and somebody was skiing down, and just wasn't getting what we were saying. We just wanted them to carve more, right? Just point it and carve more. Every time they come up over classic twist and slide, we're like, okay, that's not what we want. That's not happening. So it's coming round. It's coming round. Georgie and I chat to each other. It's like, we're missing something here. Said it in all the different ways we could. Is like, do more of this, do more of that, do more of this, more of that. And then, like, tip your foot over more, like the ski do this. And then when this person came around, they did it one time, and we were like, that's it. We were like trying to like not be too excited. We're like, what did you do? And this person was like, oh, I just did less turn. I turned less, and that was it. And so this person, she thought that it was like when we were saying anything we said about more, tip the skis over more to get more edge and do this and that. She took that as, because her initial feeling was this, that was her tendency. So any more that she did was that. So anytime she thought of less, she did that. And it was like, wow, that's.
Yeah.
And I remember then, after George and I were inside, and we were like, I just thought to myself, am I just getting in the way here? I think I'm saying this gold, and it's like, you know what? Actually, I'm essentially getting in the way. So that's one thing
Yeah.
I've had plenty of times over my coaching where I've thought, yeah, humbled, humbled
Yes.
is
Yeah.
one. It's like, okay, am I like a lot of the words you've been using through this chat are words like facilitate and manage, and things like that. And I think that's an important one. Is it's almost, when I think of those words, it almost gives you like you detach from the situation and you look at it from like a
Mm.
outside perspective, which I think is often good, because that's the time when you see those sorts of things. Right? You think, okay, I'm too in the weeds here. I need to step back and what am I missing?
Yeah, it's a really interesting points. We, as far as do less, we used to quote Forgetting Sarah Marshall all the time. I don't know if you remember the surf lesson where Paul Rudd was teaching Jason Siegel how to surf, and he's like, "Okay, pop up," and he's like, "No, you're doing too much. Do less."
Yeah,
He's like, "Okay, pop up," and then eventually he just lies
yeah,
there. He's like, "Well, you can't just lie there."
yeah,
And so, like, that's what we would take into our coaching
yeah,
quite a bit. If somebody's trying to do too much, we say, "Hey, pop up!"
yeah,
Like, well, you can't just lie
yeah,
there. So that's a quote that we would use quite a
yeah,
bit. And then the other thing is, in terms of like being able to have that perspective, or the facilitator or manager type role. I mean, it's really difficult when somebody's first starting to coach or to instruct. In terms of like, the things that I wish I knew at that point, like, entering the world of instructing and coaching. Yeah, I wish I had that perspective, but unfortunately, like that does come from experience.
mm,
But it's also okay to recognize that maybe you don't know it all.
yeah,
And just be facilitating an environment, and trying a couple of different things is all you need. So it doesn't necessarily need to be gold coming out of your mouth. But if you're doing a good job as far as a manager or facilitator, and being okay with taking a step back, then often you can achieve some pretty cool things too.
We had this chat recently, and we're talking about saying that about like gold coming out of the mouth. We were doing a teach exam, and I often use this reference, like it's the first morning, they've just met me, I'm in an examiner uniform, and no one knows each other. You're at the top of the lift, and it's silent always, no matter how much you try and talk or whatever, it's always quiet. And so then we go for a ski, and then halfway down the run, everyone's like, oh, it's skiing, so like they're enjoying it, having fun. So it's like, oh, okay, let's go for it, let's carry on, snow's good, I don't need to say anything, let's just go skiing. And then by the time we come up at the next time, people are chatting and things. And I always say, like, what's different this time than the first time? And they always get it right. They're like, oh, we were nervous and you didn't know what to say, and it's a teach exam, so I'm scared to say the wrong thing and this sort of stuff. And it's like, yeah, it's just skiing, like, and it doesn't matter if what I was going to say on that first time was going to be the best thing that they've ever heard. They weren't listening. Like, it doesn't matter what I say, it's who's listening. And so it's like, it's the same first run after lunch. It's like everyone's a bit tired, their belly's full. Like, you save that bit of gold that you've got. Maybe do it next run, because it's like, again, it doesn't necessarily matter what you say. It's who's listening. So that type of thing. So that's, like you said before, facilitating the person and where they're at is the most important thing, I think.
Yeah, I mean, and you know that from experience, right? Like, maybe you had those golden lines in the first minute of seeing someone in a teach exam, and they just went to waste.
Yeah, exactly.
So that after a couple of times of doing it, you know when to unleash the nuggets, so to speak, and that does come with experience and getting some reps, just like you do as an athlete.
Yeah. So when you again, you're in a bit of a coaching role now, and I'm sure you work with other coaches, new coaches, things like that. So I've asked the question is, what would you say to a young Josh, putting on the uniform for the first time, or what do you say? What do you find yourself saying to younger coaches? So anything a bit of advice or anything you say to them before they go?
Yeah, I think a lot of people come into coaching or instructing because they truly love the sport, whatever that sport is. And I think that was absolutely true of me. But also I sort of continued to develop to realize that I love working with people. It wasn't just about the skiing side of things. So, I mean, it's why I really like coaching the touch rugby club here in San Diego. And that's, it's an area that I know a little bit about, but, I'm actually formally trained in the ski world. So, there's a difference there in background. So what I would say to anybody coming into coaching for the first time is share that enthusiasm. Share that enthusiasm for the sport, whatever it is that you're trying to help in the coaching with, because enthusiasm is really infectious. It's what I tried to do. I remember coming in with Alex Casillas and we were the cowboys that came in, first year coaches, and all we did was just like rip around the mountain and try and share our passion for skiing, because we weren't half bad at it, and we wanted to have this like group of rat bags, essentially, and Parachute Water Sports Club kids follow us, and it was awesome, so fun. I knew nothing. Let's be very clear. Like I knew nothing, very, very little. But I pulled what I did know from some like athletic background, as well as some of coaching, freestyle level 1 coaching courses that I did, to try and convey some information. But at the end of the day, like Alex and I were young coaches that were really happy to ski around and quite aggressively, and as long as we were safe, I think that was really infectious. So that's the first thing, like share the enthusiasm. The second thing is the like just understanding that nothing, and that's okay. And realizing that, or maybe not nothing, that's a bit unfair, but like understanding that you don't know it all, and that's it's totally all right. Like what changes from one day being uncertified to the next day being certified, it's whether or not it's an instructor or a coach or whatever it is, it's very little. So you don't know it all, but what you can do is learn and ask really good questions. So whether or not that's with the people around, like you said earlier, like learning from other people around, or like doing those, more formal accreditation or certification courses. I think that upskilling and curiosity to continue to develop is really, really important. So if you have that combination of enthusiasm and a desire to learn and continue to learn, I think that's a pretty killer combo to be an awesome coach and instructor or facilitator, whatever you so please, whether or not that's for a 3-hour lesson or for a season long or multi-year program. So that's what I would say to my former self. I think I was probably maybe a little maybe not confident, but just maybe like a little pig-headed or stubborn in a sense in terms of like my knowledge base. And it took a while for me to sort of really realize that, wow, there's so much information out there and so many people who are really awesome to be able to learn from, and sort of being able to have that humility to go, yeah, right, like you probably know more, and I'm gonna ask you a lot of questions about it. I think is really important, and is still the case these days.
On that piece you're saying there about ripping around on those days, so I think about that a lot in Oz, and if often it was those days where there was some snow, but when the snow came in Oz, often it was quite heavy and that type of thing, and so the weather would come in, and it wouldn't be the best weather, it wouldn't be the bluebird sky and all that thing, but they were some of the days where they were the days that the kids will remember at the end of the season. They were the day now. If we spoke to some of the kids that were in that program at this time, they are some of the days that they would pick up and they would remember. So like you were saying, in terms of like in the future, as like what do you want? What do you want them to remember? What do you want them to do? Is it important that they, sit still and do this drill or do that? And it's like, well, that's twofold. It's like they're gonna more likely listen to you if they know that when it comes to it, you're gonna have a good time as well. So when it comes to the time where they have to be disciplined and that sort of thing, then they're more likely to play into that if they know that you can get a little loose at times too, and that's okay, and that there is time for that. I remember those days because we would come up on the lift or we'd come up on the train and it's like, okay, it snowed today. It would be like a rebuild day or something. It'd be like, do you mind, it snowed, so I think we should go skiing. It's like, hell yeah. So then, and you could see like the kids, like you were saying, were frothing on it. And then, yeah, they were the days I remember actually looking back and like I said before about building a team environment, and knowing that like you've got their back as a coach is because you threw down with them. Like, I remember there's videos of front flips, back flips off of different rocks around. I'm sure it was okay, it was allowed, but yeah, like that's the stuff I remember the kids would be sending around at lunch, and it's like, oh, do you see, did this and did that, and I think that's important to build that environment.
Like build the froth. Like the froth is so fun. Like it's what makes things enjoyable. Why people want to keep coming back. At the end of the day, they have a choice to do whatever they want. Whatever athletes, students, whatever people say, whatever they want. So why would they do something that's not very fun? Especially think about like the mogul skiing world. Like it's a really fun sport, but it's freaking hard.
Yeah.
It's so freaking hard and technical and complex, and it's not as though they've got a Shohei Ohtani $700 million contract waiting at the end of their mogul skiing career. Like it's not hugely lucrative in that sense. So may as well make it really fun.
Yeah.
And as you were talking there as well, I was thinking about all those videos that on some powder days that we had in Australia of people sending it off different rocks and crashing and being okay, thank goodness. But and then some people doing some epic stuff too. It's like that stuff is really, really memorable. So may as well make it fun. May as well make like a really great team environment so that they continue showing up and continue to build that really big base. And from a performance side of things, like you build a big base so that you have a big base sort of helping the top, and that camaraderie and the sort of the number of people trying to achieve a common goal is really infectious. And I think when you're talking earlier about what is about the Winter Sports Club, and that community. I think that's a cool part of
Yeah.
it, and it was wonderful to be a part
Yeah,
of.
it's cool now, like especially this time of the season, seeing start the season and people going back and all that sort of stuff, and like now the kids I coach to mid-20s after them, and it's like some of them are still in the sport, some of them aren't, but either way they're doing great, and it's like that's really cool to see, that they're good people, so it works, right? Like,
Yeah, and totally. And like to hate to say this is with Fenners,
mm,
but Fenners came and visited me here in San
yeah,
Diego, which was awesome. Like so
yeah,
cool. Like we spent so much time together over the
yeah,
years, but great to be able to see him again.
yeah,
And that community still exists. I've like been up coaching at Momentum or
yeah,
out in Steamboat, and running into people like that within mogul
yeah,
skiing world is pretty
yeah,
awesome. So yeah, I love to continue to build that community, because at the end of the day, it's a difficult sport, and but if we can get
yeah,
behind each other trying to achieve something pretty
yeah,
cool, I think that's great. And more, I think to your point there around like finding that love of the sport. What I love to see, obviously, it's great for people to be involved in mogul skiing and the pathways. But more broadly, I love seeing people go touring or just going on ski
mm,
holidays, because that to me says that they enjoy it much more broadly than just like the athletic pursuit of
yeah,
competition mogul skiing.
yeah,
And I love that, and I've seen like a bunch of, athletes that I used to coach, go out early season touring
yeah,
now. And like, that's
yeah.
cool. It makes me really happy, because that's a love of the sport that's going to last a
Mm,
lifetime, outside of any sort of mogul skiing
mm.
competition career.
And that's one of the quotes, isn't it? The person who loves to walk will walk further than the person who doesn't. So it's like at a certain point, that person who's just doing it out of discipline is going to stop. Whereas the person who loves it is going to do it through those hard times or in spite of the hard times, which, like you said, in
Hmm.
mogul ski, there's a lot of them. So it's a tough sport. But but yeah, we've come to the end here, and yeah, thanks for that, Josh. I appreciate all your insights. And yeah, you're a big person that I thought in my mind when I started this podcast that I wanted to talk to again, because there's so much of this stuff that you said that we've spoken about in the past, and has helped me so far in my career. So yeah, I really appreciate your time and coming on.
Yeah, thanks, Stevie J. Thanks for having me, and keep doing awesome things. I love watching you ski and what you're doing in the ski world in general. So, people could do a lot worse than to hang out with you, both on and off snow.
Yeah,
So, appreciate you taking the
cheers,
time.
dude.